On a late-night drive through Texas, Chad Ganaway and his fiancée Chelsea hit a 1,500-pound cow at 65 miles per hour. The impact sent them spinning off the road into a field. Chad and Chelsea were knocked unconscious.
I woke up, and the first thing I remember noticing is that I felt something on my head, running on my head, and I didn't know what it was. And I wiped my head, and obviously it was blood. And then I noticed that the cow had taken the top of our vehicle completely off. It had shredded the top of the car. And I looked up in the sky and I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Help us, Jesus!" I mean, just as loud as I could scream. I had a whole lot of pain with my arm. So I said, "Chelsea, my arm is broke really bad." I said, "It was really bad." So I looked over at her, and her face was covered with blood. She wasn't responding. She wasn't conscious. And the whole time I was praying, and then I would yell I would say, "Chelsea!" And her eye that was not injured would barely open, and then it would just roll back in her head, and her head would hit the seat.
Chad called 911 on his cell phone. Within an hour, emergency personnel located them in the dark Texas night and pulled them from the wreckage. They were medevac to a hospital in Odessa, where Chelsea was placed in the ICU in a coma.
The MRI suggests there's massive damage towards the right frontal and temporal area of her brain. We really didn't expect her to recover much of her functions at all.
When I walked into that ICU room, I mean, that's as low as I've ever been in my life. All we could get from the ICU nurses is, "We don't know. Your guess is pretty much as good as ours," because with cases like this, when they're in a coma and there's brain swelling, sometimes they don't wake up, sometimes they'll wake up 3 months later. It's really uncertain on how it's going to turn out.
Chad had grown up a Christian, but had lived a double life in recent years. As he faced Chelsea's critical situation, he realized there was only one place to turn.
It didn't take me too long to realize that God was on my side and to lock into God's promises. I mean, during the whole week of ICU, I would go in and read healing scriptures over Chelsea. I was reading healing prayers over her every single day. I mean, pretty early on, I realized that this was how Chelsea was going to be healed. I made my mind up that I didn't want to hear what the doctor said. I didn't want to know what the MRI said. I didn't want to know what the CAT scan said, because I made my mind up I was going to believe what God said. My eyes didn't see a way out. The doctors didn't give us a fair chance of a way out of having our lives back the way they were. But I knew, because of Christ in me, that there was hope.
Chelsea spent a week in ICU before waking from her coma. A week later, she was transferred to the Warm Springs Rehabilitation Center in Victoria, Texas.
She came in, again, all odds against her. Therapy-wise, I was very concerned about what her future was going to be.
From the clinical exams here, I would say she had a very poor prognosis. She pretty much would need 24-hour supervision.
The entire right side of her body was still paralyzed, and when she did start coming back, it was almost like she was starting over again. I mean, she couldn't write, she couldn't read, she couldn't talk. When she talked, nothing made sense.
Chad and Chelsea were surrounded by their church friends and family. As word got out about the accident, people around the world prayed for Chelsea's recovery.
We had so much support that, I mean, we'll never know until we go to heaven how many people were really praying for us. There's no way for us to ever find out.
The doctors in Victoria were amazed by Chelsea's recovery. They performed a second MRI to confirm the extent of her brain injury.
And we compared the two MRI. The second one, there was some injury, but not nearly to the extent that we have seen in the first one. And we really couldn't explain any of the event, between the discrepancy between the two. It's not like, oh, this was really bad and then it healed up a little bit. It was just really two different MRI.
To the amazement of her doctors, a month and a half after the accident, Chelsea walked out of Warm Springs Rehabilitation Center ready to resume her life. Her ability to communicate, read, write, and walk completely restored. Her only remaining scar, an enlarged pupil in her right eye, a reminder of the accident and the healing.
God does amazing work. I mean, he's so awesome that he healed me so much that I'm back to normal.
Chelsea's recovery was nothing short of a miracle. We really didn't know how to explain it.
The only way I can describe what has happened is Ephesians 3:20. It says he'll do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can think or even imagine, according to the power that works in us. And that scripture has become my favorite scripture through this whole thing. He gave me every specific prayer I prayed in the Odessa hospital. Every one of them has come to pass, you know. And so I prayed some very specific things, and every single one of them has happened.
This made me be a better person. It made me love God so much more. I mean, I've always loved God, but now I just feel like I know exactly what he can do, and so I experienced him, and he actually healed me. So, I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I got to see he can heal people for real, for real.